What is up, guys? Welcome back to Over the Underrated, in which we go over actors' roles from the past that don't get the recognition they quite deserve. And today I have with me a very special guest that you may know best as Gabriel in Trick, and from his appearances on Law and Order, The Good Fight, Chicago Med, Blue Bloods, and so much more. But today we know him best as Jimmy Harper in Reefer Madness, Mr. Christian Campbell. How are you?
Hey, I'm great, thanks. How you doing?
So I know that Nev started off in musical theater with Phantom of the Opera, one of the six ballet quartets. So was musical theater very important in your family?
Not musical theater actually. It was my father was a drama teacher. He taught drama in high school for 35 years up in Canada, high school drama, and then my grandparents back in Holland were actors as well. Our grandparents, they were actors just after the war in Amsterdam. And then my mom, she also was an actor. My dad and my mom actually met in theater school, going to college. So there's theater all over, and then we've got a stage manager in our family. We've got a stunt person. We've got a wardrobe person. There's just a lot of people who are either movie or theater adjacent in the family for sure. But musical theater wasn't something that we had a lot of exposure to because we were in Toronto, and Toronto didn't have a lot of musical theater at that time. I'm a child of the 70s, 80s. Cats was like the first thing I'd heard of. It was like, oh, that's a musical. And so we weren't raised in musicals. And then, Phantom of the Opera coming to Toronto was a huge deal. So Nev got getting cast in that, but she was cast in that because she had a ballet background.
Right.
And so that's what brought her into that. But for me, musical theater, my first experience of musical theater actually was Reefer Madness.
Oh, okay. And that started in 1998, right?
1998, yeah. And that's the first time I'd really had done any musical theater proper. I'd sung, right? I was in a choir in Toronto, and like a very good choir. And so I was around music, and I really enjoyed music, and I had a natural talent affinity for singing, but I didn't really have an attraction to musical theater. I actually thought it's a weird genre and not really my style.
Hmm.
It's a little too over the top and blah blah blah. I was going to be a true thespian, an actor.
Did you act in movies before you started in Reefer Madness?
Yeah. I mean, I started acting first of all with my family. There's a tradition in Scotland. My dad's from Glasgow, and there's a tradition in Scotland called the panto, and it's also in England, all through the UK. It's the panto, and the panto is this seasonal thing during Christmas holidays, leading up to and even afterwards. They'll put on a show at local communities all throughout the British Isles. They put on these shows in which they'll often take a fairy tale or a myth or just something that we all know and kind of rejigger it, contemporize it, make fun of it. And there are always standard things about the genre. Like there's always a man who's dressed up in drag in it, and he's the comedian. And then they'll often take local politicians or people who are somehow involved in sort of the more sort of mundane parts of society. They'll get bit parts, and so it's a great way for the community to get together and laugh and laugh at ourselves. But it's a great way to get politics across. And so my dad had a real affinity for that genre and started worked with the company, the Scottish Performing Arts Company in Toronto, because there's a big population of Scots there. And so that was and for Nev and I, our first experience on stage was in these pantos. The first time I acted was with a Scottish accent. Yeah, so
Oh,
that was sort of my jump into it all. And so that was just, not being paid. It's basically slave labor. But then when I was 13, my mom she ran a dinner theater, and I did a production of A Thousand Clowns by Herb Gardner
wow.
and played a role in that. There was a kid role in that I did. And then I started with Degrassi High. Actually, Degrassi, I was my first being on screen, even though I was more of a glorified extra in that series, but it got me my in. I spent a couple of years on that series, and then had an agent and started doing TV and little bit parts. And the first movie I think I did that I could say I was a lead in, I did a movie called City Boy with Sarah Chalke and James Brolin.
Oh, wow.
And I did that in 1990, and that was like one of those family films. And yeah, it's a sweet little film.
Starting off in family and then going to Reefer Madness. That's a good jump right there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Do you think it's easier to act on stage and then you have a live audience, you kind of know what's working and what's not, or do you like working in movies more?
theater, there's this the instant gratification of the audience and that connection with them, which, given the world that we're living in now, I'm realizing is just so much more important for me, given that so much of our interaction now is divided by technology, and now AI is going to be another dividing wall between us. Social media has become a dividing wall, and I think that that ability for an audience and the actors or performers on stage and the writers in the audience listening to their words and the director and all of it, all of us connecting together in this moment that can never be replicated again, in which there are going to be spontaneous moments that have us all bound together, like kind of laughing together, all of that, I think is really, first of all, as an actor, there's nothing better than getting that in immediate response back. And because it feeds you, but at the same time, it tells you where you want to go with your audience. And so you don't get that in film. You might have the crew and whatnot there, but you're not going to get that same. They all have to stay quiet. So if you're doing a comedy, it's not like you're going to hear laughter coming from the crew.
Right.
You just have to trust that what we're doing is going to work and that the editor is going to make it all work. And okay,
Yeah.
right. So I guess it is. I guess that's a long way of saying, yeah, it's not as satisfying necessarily doing film. Now, where film is satisfying and TV is you get chances to really rework and dig into scenes and into moments and to little turns of phrases where you can go back and try that again. That's great. It's a different kind of science.
So, like you said, you can't really start laughing out loud when you're filming a movie or a comedy like that. But with Reefer Madness, there's just so many great comedical bits. What was the hardest scene to get through with a straight face?
Oh, well, I think the orgy always is a hard one to get through because there's not, especially in the stage production, which we're all sitting in, in the movie, we're all quite naked except for, the privy parts. But
Yeah.
in the stage musical, it was more ridiculous than that because we were all wearing skin colored bodysuits, which anyone in a skin bodysuit looks ridiculous. And so that to me was funny. And not only that, you're like sweating, so it's sweating through. So just it's a terrible all around visual of all these actors with their weird bodies and all of us all just in our bodysuits, and that was hard to keep a straight face.
There's a lot of great big musical numbers in the movie. Which one was the hardest for filming with you?
Oh, for the movie, the hardest one to shoot would have been Mary Jane Marilyn, and the reason why, first of all, complex song, and it was a new song, so it's not like I'd had a lot of practice doing it on stage hundreds of times, whereas I'd had that kind of experience with all the other songs. But because this song was written to be an original song for the movie, we were sort of just doing it right there. But we also it was one of those crazy nights of filming where we were running out of time. We had to be off the location at a certain hour because I think the location, was going to go away. And if we didn't get out of there, there was going to be a massive penalty. And so we had to, that scene in which I'm on the front driveway as I approach, I drive up in the car and I get out of the car and then I start the song. A lot of that was just, me improvising even movement. We were just throwing it together. It's like, okay, so I'll do this and I'll do this and I'll do this and I'll do this. And I got to move over there to get to the mailbox where we're going to have some special effects there. It's not happening there, but just get it done. And it was just like this fast thing. It was high stress. My dad was watching because he happened to be on set that day. So he watched this whole sort of like slow controlled crash basically. Which in the end turned out well, but on the day it was tense. It was tense.
Yeah, it turned out, that's one of my favorite musical numbers from the movie. I really like that one. And a lot of the musical numbers, they were added and taken away from the stage play. But what was the biggest change from the play to the movie, story wise?
It's a good question for the writers actually, but I would say there's not really too much that comes to mind in terms of the breakaway. I guess that's a hard question for me to answer. That's a good question. I may have to get back to you on that, or I'll have to think about that in case someone asks me in the future. I don't know what the big difference. I mean, the big difference, of course, is Mary Jane, Mary Lane structurally. The murder was actually that's a big jump from what we did in LA because murder was added in New York, but it's got this very sort of operatic third act feel to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big solid change, I think. Yeah, and then that Jack and Jesus are not played by the same person. That's a big change that was always an interesting play.
Yeah, the dichotomy of playing good and evil.
Yeah, exactly.
With the stage play, did it have an intermission?
It did.
Something I've been trying to figure out, what was the, because after every stage plays, before the intermission comes, there's always that big musical number, and what was it in the stage play?
Well, you don't see it in the you wouldn't see it, but it would be when he goes on the lam, and then and what happens is the second act opens with Jimmy, Jimmy, where are you? And that's Mary going across the stage looking for Jimmy, and then the lecturer goes, last we were here, blah blah blah. So basically it's he leaves after I think it would be after the Brownie song. Is it Brownie? Yeah, maybe. No, I'm so confused. It's been a long time ago since I don't even know how it ends. But there was a big number there that's no longer, in which it pulls all the characters together and they're all singing their own little like song within a song, and that tells you that we're coming to the Act 1 finale.
Okay, that was hard. Looking at the soundtrack, it's kind of hard to figure out which one is, because there's a lot of big, like I said, there's a lot of big ones in the movie.
I'd have to go and look back at the soundtrack with you right now to be able to tell you which one it is. But yeah, I'm sorry, I can't answer.
There we go. And now, 25 years later, you're coming back and producing another version of the play that's opening up in LA sometime in the near future. So how has that been going from the lead and now producing it and seeing a brand new vision for a new audience? Yeah,
well, oddly, it started quite a long time ago. It started back in 2014. That's where the seed of the idea happened, because I was approached by a couple of young people, much like your age, and they were big fans of it, and they approached me saying, "Listen, we want to produce just a held script reading of it, and perhaps we'll do it at New World Stages in New York. Is there any chance?" And we would do it to benefit any charity of your choice. And we're going to charge $100 a ticket for the ticket, because we think, well, lots of people are going to want to come and see it. Would you help us bring back original cast members for this charity? And I said, that sounds like a great idea. I don't know if anyone's going to pay $100 to see this, because I don't know if it's that popular. So I went around and we got cast members both from LA that flew out, LA that were living in New York. We got the New York version. Some of the cast members coming along. Alan Cumming came and sang. Amy Spanger came and sang from the movie. And so I sang. Of course, we had like multiple Jimmys and multiple lecturers, right? So the different people who played. Harry Murphy came to reprise his role as lecturer alongside Alan. So they passed off the baton. Okay. And so it was great. It was real successful, so successful that it oversold and people were watching it on closed circuit television out in the lobby because it was that popular.
Oh, wow.
And so that was when the light bulb went off of, oh, okay. Because I guess the writers, all of us, we did something great, but you just put it out there in the world and then you move on your merry way and do on other things, right? And that's when the light bulb went off, and I talked to the writers about, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could maybe bring the show back to New York, maybe for the 20th anniversary, maybe we'll do it even sooner than that. And it took a long time, and then a pandemic hit, and all that kind of stuff. The pandemic hit. We had plans to do a production starting in 2019, 2020, but then the pandemic hit, and that of course, the wheels fell off.
That doesn't help.
Yeah. And then we came out of the pandemic, and during the pandemic, we were searching for the right type of space, because there was one thing that happened in LA. The production was only supposed to run for 2 months, and it ended up running for 2 years. And it swept all the awards, and it was very successful. And the great thing about it was that people were coming for the comedy, but they were staying for the community, because there was the little cafe that was next doors at the Hudson Theater, and it was this little cafe that normally during the day sells like coffee and crappy donuts and muffins and stuff like that.
I'd probably love it.
Exactly, and beer and a little bit of wine and whatever, crappy wine at nighttime. And so it became the after show hangout and the pre-show hangout and the after show hangout for the audience and the cast members, who would come out and have some drinks and wind down from the performance. We kind of started lovingly calling it the Reefer Den, and that's where everyone would go hang out at the Reefer Den. And of course, there'd be people going out on the street smoking some weed and coming back in and drinking their wine and whatnot. And it just became this a community that people then wanted to come back to. Audience members came back to see the show because the show was great, but they were also coming back for all these cool people that they get to hang out with and that have similar taste and whatnot. So that was sort of my idea starting in 2014, 2015 was like, let's find a way to create a production that allows us to have this post-show, maybe even pre-show, but post-show for sure experience, so that the audience doesn't just disperse off and not be able to come together and go, that was awesome and wasn't that fun, and talk about the show and talk about the ideas, and then just have some drinks and relax and be with people. So that, you know, finding that space has been my number one thing. Difficult to find in New York, difficult to find at a good price. And so we were looking during the pandemic and then post-pandemic for that space, couldn't find it. And then our director, Spencer Lift, we've got a new director coming on for this version. He is a choreographer normally, and now he's a super fan of Reefer Madness. He watched it all through college, so this is kind of his dream job. He's just so over the moon to be doing this, and we think he's just unbelievable, and he's got a really great new vision for it. Andy Fickman's fully in support of him, and so we're all just, it's great. So he was directing. Just last November, he directed a new show called Drag, the Musical, which is exactly what you think. It's all drag queens, 17 drag queens on stage and superstars. And they did 17 performances of it at a space called the Bourbon Room in LA, in Hollywood, actually, on Hollywood Boulevard. And he called me up. He said, I think I found us our space, but it's not in New York. It's in LA. And I thought, you know what? That sounds perfect. Isn't it 25 years? 25 years. Oh, it's 6 blocks away where we originally did it. Perfect. That's the space.
Oh,
So
awesome.
it's got a bar. It's got a great place for a reefer den afterwards. It seats 200 people, so it still has that intimate thing that you want to have. It's great. So that's what we're aiming to do. It looks like we're on track for early 2024 for an opening in Los Angeles.
After all these, something that I love about the movie is, and a lot of Andy Fickman's work, a lot of the comedy, especially in the early 2000s, I think it was way ahead of its time. Like, because every decade kind of has this level of comedy, and 1930s comedy compared to, and that was kind of modernizing it. So is that going to be consistent in this?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing is that Kevin, Dan, and Andy and I are all going to be there during this, and Spencer's got a whole new feel, and he's got a whole skill set that we've never had the ability to work with in terms of his level of dance and the way he moves, and he's able to create pictures with bodies and motion on stage. He did the choreography for our workshop, and he just blew us away in terms of like all these new creative ways of enhancing the comedy, what was already great there, just bringing it up, bumping it up a little more. So we're all going to be there. We all have funny bones, and we're going to make this new. It's still going to be the Reefer Madness we all know and love. There will be some new numbers likely added to it, so there's some new music. And we are getting rid of that intermission. This is going to be an hour and a half, 90 minutes from beginning to end. Boom, you're in and out. It's a full Reefer ride.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and so that's those will be the sort of the major changes you're going to find in it. A few tweaks, all that stuff that people will be, but we're leaving everything that we all know and love about it. And then what that will be the new production that will be licensed out from here on in forward.
That's awesome. I might be across the country, but I know I'm going to find my way there. This just sounds too good to be true. This is awesome. I'm so excited for it. Well, unfortunately, we're almost out of time. But before you go, what I like to do is a question from the mixing bowl. Just a little random question. Hopefully, you've never been asked before. And the question of the day is, what is the worst you've ever been physically hurt?
The worst I've ever been physically hurt. I mean, my appendectomy comes to mind, but that's so anticlimactic. I think I've managed to really, knock on wood, I've never broken a bone. I've just been. Oh, I did get a bacterial infection that made me basically shit out my intestines. So does that count?
I'll take it.
I got hospitalized. I had to be put on massive broad spectrum antibiotics. They didn't know. They thought it was like some foreign weird thing that was eating me from inside out, and it was like literally eating me from inside out. So yes, that's it right there.
Okay, that doesn't sound the most fun. So I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah. I haven't broken a bone either. Knock on wood. I don't want to be done with this interview. I go break my leg walking down the stairs. But the first thing that comes to mind, I don't know what it is, but whenever I stub my toe, it's just amplified. I've never been in more pain than whenever I just stub my toe. That's just, it's amplified. I don't
And all the women who have given birth are like, okay, hold on.
They're looking down on us right now. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I cannot wait for Reefer Madness to come in 2024.
Okay, cheers, brother.